Hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. If you do like the programming you see here and the musicians and artists that I visit with, please be sure and hit the like button below and also subscribe to the channel. Richard Ray Harris is an American guitarist who was a member of West Coast Psych blues band, The Freedom Highway. Original members were Bruce Brymer on drums, Richard on guitar, and Scott Inglis on bass. Gary Phillipet, vocals and guitar, would join the band later, and Dave Schallock would replace Scott Inglis when Scott entered the service. The band played many live shows around the San Francisco area during the late 60s, but did not release any recordings at the time. There were recording sessions in 1968 and 1969, and that material would show up decades later in 2002 on the compilation Made in '68. Post-Freedom Highway, Richard found himself in the political arena, working on the steering committee for one presidential candidate, Howard Dean, and also for California Governor Jerry Brown's headquarters. Today, my guest is still playing live in a country ensemble. Well, welcome, Richard.
Hello.
Thanks for meeting me again today, and it seems like we have a better connection. More consistent. It's not glitching and doing that it was doing before. Well, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
I'm a San Francisco kid, 1949, right before the turn of the mid-century.
Okay, all right. Do you recall your early childhood growing up there?
Quite a bit, yes. I was playing in the street. It's like a typical New York neighborhood, and there were a lot of New Yorkers around there. Very integrated.
Yeah.
Black kid named Jimmy and me, we used to play, hide and seek in the street. I was all in love with a girl named Tina next door. She must have been about 4. I was 3.
Yeah, pretty young. Well, that was, of course, back in the day when people would leave their houses unlocked and doors unlocked and things like that, windows open. Kids play out all hours of the night. Yeah.
And I used to walk through what they call the Tenderloin was the hardest neighborhood to walk through, supposedly. But as a kid, when I was 9, by the time I was 8 or 9, I could walk there by myself because my mother worked right up the street.
Yeah.
We're talking about Turk near Market Street kind of area. That was a combat zone, Tenderloin.
Tenderloin.
It was not tough in terms of anything except you saw a drunk fella on the street, maybe dying, something like that, alcoholism, and there was a strip joint and I think Finocchio's, was that the name of it? There was a strip. It was a strip show for gay folks. It was
Okay, even back then, huh? They had those kind of joints. Well,
yeah.
Was there music
all the time? And there's a bookstore there that was the best in the world because it was dusty and inside it was piles of books, and you could sort through and find Mad magazines back there.
Oh man,
Bookstore.
I used to collect Mad. Yeah, I used to collect that. Yeah.
That was
Oh yes, definitely. Do you remember? Well, this was more recent, I guess. Remember Wacky Packages? Do you remember those?
Yeah.
We
know those. Mad too.
Right, they had every product and then a spoof on the product with a piece of stale gum.
That was sort of the spirit of the time, was an allowable amount of mockery. You had the Steve Allen show. You had people on TV that would imitate somebody, but they do it with love. Back then, they wouldn't tear a person apart.
Right. We weren't so hypersensitive back then.
No, people would, Lenny Bruce, who was a friend of my parents because my mother was a stenographer for the union. Excellent. Very good. She worked directly with the president of the union. And she was asked to transcribe Lenny Bruce's trial defense. They wanted to take her she was in charge of transcribing all of the tape recordings of Lenny Bruce's actual live show. So as a 12-year-old, I got to hear, and 13-year-old, I got to hear Lenny Bruce's act in my living room as my mother would sit at home, presenting that to use as Lenny's defense in court.
Wow. Even at that age, Wow, that's
Oh
something.
yeah, I got this.
Yeah.
I heard his whole act. We was on TV too
Yeah,
before that.
yeah, yeah. Well, you were exposed to it earlier than most, I would say. You definitely. Well, was there music in the household when you were growing up?
Yeah, really nice Scott uh, amplifier by the time 58 rolled in, and we had
Yeah,
Gerard turntable and a Pickering cartridge on that. Just terrific sound. I
yeah.
love the speakers. But yeah, I just to stick my head because I was deaf for
Okay.
many years as a child. I missed a period of the mid 50s, but by the time we found a good doctor that was analyzing the ear problem, I was able to hear that stuff. But as a child, I used to stick my head down into the hi-fi. I'd crawl over to those speakers,
Yeah, yeah.
speaker, one speaker, and
I used to. I mean, I didn't have a problem hearing, but I used to get real close to my dad's hi-fi, and he turned me on to Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass.
yeah,
That's one of the ones that he really liked, and
terrific.
I still have a couple of his original albums here. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
with me. Yeah, and who was the other? Oh, a Baja Marimba band. Do you remember them?
yeah.
Similar,
Very
similar.
good stuff. Java
Yeah,
Jive.
right. Exactly. So that's what I was growing up to. Well, were either one of your parents musically
No,
inclined at all? No,
no. My
no.
father took up classical guitar. I was inspiring him, I guess, because I was 7 years old playing, and I had a harmonica holder because I wanted to be like Woody Guthrie, and that was 1958.
Yeah, yeah,
So I was blowing the harmonica holder and playing, and I kind of advanced along a little bit faster than my brother who got lessons. And that encouraged my father. So he went out and he got the lessons, but I think he was actually secretly in love with my guitar teacher named Laura Weber.
Oh, is
She
that
had a famous woman later because she got her own TV show. She was so good,
right? Yeah.
but she taught us all the Woody Guthrie and the
Mhm.
mountain music of the real traditions of American music and some drinking songs, the Irish drinking songs and seafaring songs.
Yeah,
Billy Terrier's Drill, What Shall
yeah.
We Do with the Drunken Sailor?
Oh,
I
okay,
came
okay,
out of the same tradition as Dylan did.
okay,
And
okay.
then I'm surprised everybody comes out with a harmonica holder in 1962. I'd already been playing that. Very, very,
That's. Did
like a
we already
professional.
talk about this? Have you seen the uh the Dylan movie? Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, I haven't
I'd
either.
much prefer not to go back to any of the 60s.
Yeah,
I prefer to stay in now.
yeah, yeah,
I don't appreciate the retelling. I appreciate that people can see it who didn't experience it. But for me, it was a very bad time.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, and I don't think that's even if it were a good time, I'd want to go back because that's not nostalgia is death.
yeah. Right, right.
Here's what I played. This is New Year's Eve,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Freedom Highway.
Yes.
That's a famous poster. People know that one. But a few months earlier, I opened with Neil Young in Buffalo
Yeah.
Springfield. I'm always
Oh,
above
did,
the
did you?
smallest,
Did you? I
the
love.
smallest name at the
You know
bar.
the West Coast. I'm sure it's more than one artist that did those, but this
West Coast.
it's a unique style.
I
Those.
knew Wes pretty well. We used to
Yeah,
socialize.
yeah.
Wes and Eva, he passed away, moved to the Midwest, Masonic, and
Oh, okay, okay.
but he was a terrific guy. Man, I loved going over to their place out in the valley. But we had a huge storm out there in '82, and people were
Yeah,
flooded out of their homes.
yeah, yeah.
National disaster.
Well, did you want to mention a little briefly or a little bit about your going back to the 50s, mid 50s, about the FBI and your family being
Well,
threatened?
yes, one of the things that we dealt with was the Hollywood 10 type of intimidation that was more than just a 10. They were
Yeah,
all out there in the field with the FBI finding people who were union members, strong union members, weak union members, whoever, who were associated with progressive movements. And my parents were two of those. So as a child, it started in the 50s. My father, I remember watching the television avidly on a black and white, rabbit ears, the McCarthy hearings. And that was something that I've never seen before. My father was looking upset. I'd never seen it. He was always happy. But when he looked at that as a
Yeah.
child, I understood that that was not a good thing
Right.
that we were dealing with.
Right.
But the author, Jessica Mitford, who is an avowed communist, used to come to our house every Thursday night for dinner. And she was famous. And of course, her husband, True Half, uh, was a legal firm, True Half, in Oakland, that hired Hillary Clinton, oddly enough, in the 70s. That was her first job. But they were a couple, Bob True Half and Jessica Mitford. But because of our association with them, the FBI would set a couple of guys out in a car outside our house for a long time.
For a long time. Yeah.
Till I
Uh,
was 13.
yeah. Yeah. So that's got to be a eerie experience. Yeah.
Yeah, but one time they came up to the door to ask about, because they wanted my father, not me.
Uh,
Is your father here?
yeah.
And I remember them shaking. The two kids, I mean, they were kids because I was 9 years old, but they were kids.
Yeah.
They,
Yeah.
they were like more afraid of me than I was of them.
Right. Right. Wow. Well, I think we're seeing that coming around again. You know, the liberals, the Democrats have always been a threat. The left side has always been a threat. I think we're starting to see that come around again. Yeah. Well, I think my parents must have protected me, sheltered me. Let's just put it that way, because I don't remember watching anything on TV about Vietnam. I don't remember that at all. So they must have not turned on the TV, or turned it on channels with lighthearted programming,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Not the news. Yeah. So I think that's probably best that I didn't. well, well, what?
Well,
Go ahead.
the fascist idea is not a good fit
Yeah.
here.
No, no, here it's not.
The word. You
No,
got the tradition of free speech
yeah,
is so deep, and people take it for granted that they are able to be MAGA.
yeah,
They're able to be that far out. They say, "Well, this is a free country. We can be for Trump, can't we?" And
right,
they're right.
right.
But once that gets taken away, they're not going to like it so much, and it doesn't fit here.
No, it doesn't. Not with democracy. They just kind of don't coexist real well. Uh, well, what was the first musical instrument you learned to play? Was
So
it a
our first,
guitar?
our
Okay,
mom was the second.
okay, yeah. Did you take any lessons or just self-taught?
Yeah, just Laura Weber was the first that launched me, and then from then point on, I was self-taught. And I must say, I could have used somebody who was a little bit more disciplined looking over my shoulder, but because I had the kind of childhood, not knocking my parents because they were two great people, I was an afterthought. And they really didn't say, "Oh boy, look at this! The guy's maybe got a career." As a little child novice, I could play at
Yeah,
7,
yeah, yeah.
but there was no sort of knowledge of the business or interest in pushing me or any kind of thing. I did it all myself. And
Okay,
by the time I was 15,
yeah,
I had no real guidance. Bill
oh,
Graham came to see me at this little club called 1090 Page. It was a house, a Victorian, and that's where the Big Brother started. And he was my first father figure sort of guy that said, "Whoa, maybe this guy's got something." But he
yeah,
was pretty busy in those days. You can imagine, Randy
yeah,
Michael Bloomfield, the big stars of Rolling
yeah,
Stones. Was he going to care for this little kid? But he went and joined me in the union.
yeah,
I owe him my career. He joined me, called the union. He says, "Get this kid in the union so he can play my hall."
yeah. He saw
Thank
talent
you,
there.
Bill Graham.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when your parents found out that you were serious about music, uh, were they encouraging or were they trying
Yeah,
to say, okay?
they were gone.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, well then that
I'm
answers
not.
that
This is
one.
not a suppressed laugh of a man who is
Yeah,
suffering. I love
okay,
him. I, made peace with every. I
yeah,
never had a problem with them
yeah,
at
yeah.
all.
Okay,
I understood that their lives were they were very important people in the
yeah,
world, and I understood their lives had meaning beyond being great parents. They
yeah.
just weren't that kind.
Right, right.
It's
Of
like
course.
Betty Davis or one of those, Joan Crawford type of persons that is a great actor
Uh-huh.
and they were
But
terrible parents.
but
So,
behind the
what
scenes,
do
yeah.
I do?
Yeah. Watch
You
those
know,
but no watch those wire hangers. Yeah,
you
clothes
don't have to
hangers.
try.
Yeah.
And it made me, maybe it made me stronger. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Well, can you remember first concert that you attended that you went to?
It's Tom Hanks and
Oh yeah,
Steve Spielberg.
show
That's
that.
amazing. Yeah, yeah.
A
You're
little
right,
bit
Eddie.
close. Can you get it closer to the screen there? Yeah, there you go. So we
The
can
first
see.
concert I played was
There you go.
with
There's Tom Cruise. Yeah.
yeah. Well, one of the first concerts I played was at a summer camp, but the first time I
Okay.
played was a cast party in San
Okay.
Bruno
Okay.
for a little high school play, and I don't know. I guess it
Yeah.
was playing at
Well,
Bill Graham's
yeah.
auditorium.
Okay. Well,
Looked
I
like
meant
Open
before
Highway.
that, a first concert that you went to see someone else.
Oh, Theater Bacal at the
Oh, okay.
McDonald's Auditorium, 1962.
Oh,
What
all
a
right.
show! No
Oh,
microphone. I mean,
no
they may have
microphone.
had an overhead somewhere.
Yeah.
They didn't, have to. They didn't mic the guitar.
Okay.
What a storyteller! What a terrific in
Yeah.
how many language he spoke?
Yes.
Theater
Yeah.
Bacal.
Wow.
Solo.
Yes. Now that would be one for yeah, for the books.
Anthony Payton.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
we used to see something called the Fandango, which is down on Gold Street in San Francisco, where they close off the street and then have a Dixieland band. You
okay,
know. And
okay.
then, of course, at the ballpark, they had an actual band in the stands at Candlestick Park. Can you believe?
In the park.
Yeah, it was a wonderful. It's like Turk Murphy, but wasn't Turk Murphy. It was another well-known Dixieland band around the Bay Area.
Okay.
Well, that was fun.
Kind of like Beatles at Shea Stadium. Yeah, I guess
Uh,
that
During games,
yeah, yeah, right, right. Wow, wow. And they don't do that kind of thing anymore, you know. Uh it's a huge production these days to do that and tons of money thrown at those. Well, can you what were some early musical influences in bands that you were into?
Ray Charles,
Okay.
Mahalia Jackson. Those are the people. Burl Ives, Harry Belafonte. Oh, the big band music. And I
Okay.
remember because we had a lady that would come over for probably about $10 a week. A black woman would come over, whom I considered my mother. Really, she made sure I was dressed and walked me to school. But she made a little sandwich for me and put it in a tin.
Yeah.
And she used to turn on the radio, which I think was KOBY in San Francisco. And just as I was ready to go to school, the sign off music was Moonlight Serenade.
Yes, yes, yes.
Wonderful piece of music. It
Oh,
was so impactful and it had diminished chords in it. So my ears were getting attuned to things that weren't just rock and roll.
right.
Then my father had a massive symphonic collection. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes, it does. Yes, it does. I see where those influences, help shape you later on too. Well, there was of course, in that area, there was definitely a music scene developing when you were a teenager, and before
Well,
that.
my father in the early 60s, when I was still under eight, was before I was a teenager, he would go to see Miles Davis.
Uh,
And I'd sit out in the car because, Miles was recording his album at the Black Hawk. My
okay.
father wanted to go, so he went. That was his haunt. He was a drinker, and he would go out in all the clubs and he listened to whoever was there. But Miles was recording that week, and I sat out in the car, and it's a famous recording, Miles at the Black Hawk.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, how about your first band? Were you in a band before the Freedom Highway?
No, that was
Okay.
it. What
Okay.
happened to the Freedom Highway was the name of a song by the Staples Singers. Fantastic piece of music. Phil
Right.
Upchurch played the bass on the recording, by the way.
Right.
And it was a song dedicated in March about the march of Selma on
Selma.
on the bridge.
That's what it was about. Right.
That was
Right.
it about from Selma to Montgomery, and it was the song that they wrote, and then the album came out with a Freedom Highway song,
Yeah.
And I had a band name in mind that was called City Lights, named after the City Light bookstore. I like that name. And
Yeah.
also the Chaplin film. And I
Right.
quickly changed the name of the band because it hasn't really formed yet. It was just my brother and a couple other guys. When Scott came in, I said, Freedom Highway is the name of our band. And
Yeah.
we played that song, Freedom Highway, on stage. And that's why Bill Graham hired us.
That's what it did it. Okay. Okay. Well, what kind of guy was Bill?
He was my father figure because he was decisive and determined to win. And he did it on his own. There was one security guard at those first concerts. I went to them, the first one, the Mime Troupe benefit.
Yeah.
And the guy named Bill was a black cop, and he was the one guy that was there, and wouldn't bother anybody. It was Bill that was running around the hall to make sure that nobody was screwing up and that nobody was climbing up the fire escape to get in and running out in front of the building to make sure there was nobody out of line or causing trouble and making sure everything from the top to the bottom ran smoothly. That was a model, hard-working guy,
Oh, yeah.
an
Yeah.
escapee from the concentration camps.
Yes. Right.
Wow. And
Exactly.
there he was doing it all on his own. And what happened was
Yeah.
Chet Helms came in. He was great. And he had another way of doing things. And it was great. The Avalon was one of my haunts. We went there for free all the time. Because if you were a musician and you played at any of those halls, you got in for free.
Okay.
So, Chet was good, but he complained to Bill one time. He says, how could you have done that? You booked Paul Butterfield band right from out from under me. I was going to book them here at the Avalon to have their first show here. And Bill says, you know what time it is in New York right now? It's 3 hours later.
Later. Yeah.
I wake up at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
and I call them.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
how they're playing at Fillmore before they're playing your
Yeah.
all.
Right. Right.
And so if anybody was going to go downtown to talk to the mayor, the police department, set things straight to make everything was legit, legal, all the T's crossed, it
Yeah.
was Bill, not Chet.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
That
There's
taught me the
something.
lesson of the business.
Right. Right. Yeah. There's something to be said about that. Like you said, the heritage about the his relatives, the concentration camp, and things like that. I think a lot of them that came from that kind of background really overcame, and they really made something of themselves. I mean, you see it today. You hear about so many that they had relatives that were persecuted. Something about that suffering and that it makes them stronger. Having to go through
Well,
that.
that we won the war made us stronger.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's exactly right. Very much so. Well, the you and the other band members, did you have similar taste in music?
I think so, but to a point, there was a sort of a jam session kind of vibe that happened right after Hendrix hit, I think, that just tore up the whole concept of hit record top 40,
Okay.
jingle jangly, sweet flowers of 66, 67.
Yeah.
No more left bank songs that are
Right.
sweetly arranged.
Right.
It's going to be a display of your expertise on the guitar and your soloing abilities and this jam feeling that
Yeah.
permeated. And Dave Schallock was one of my favorite musicians. God, what a bass player he is and
Yeah.
singer. Man, I loved his voice too.
Right. Right.
He was from that school around town that was really R&B influenced, and I was too, but I never put it into the music because that wasn't my course. I was more into the other kind. I wanted pop songs. I wanted, like Scott, my initial bass player, we were more into doing something short, snappy, and poppy,
Right. Right.
jingle jangly, pretty. You
Well,
know what I mean? Like the
yeah,
Who. I mean, they did such
yeah.
beautiful work.
Well,
So,
you mentioned the left. Mentioned the left bank. They were one of my favorites. That Baroque pop, and
yeah.
and of course the zombies, and
Right.
left bank were two of my favorites. Yeah, yeah, from that
Well,
time.
where we went with that conversation, I've
Yeah,
forgotten exactly where that question came, but to put a point on it, I
yeah,
think the R&B feeling
yeah,
really took over in the Bay Area because there were no recording studios. Nobody
Oh,
was having a hit except Sly Stone. That
oh,
was the
okay.
biggest band in the Bay Area. Forget the fact that you had your few songs from the Jefferson Airplane. They could not sustain anything there.
Right, right.
And you had to change to become something else, you see,
Yeah,
to become hit makers, get Mickey Thomas in there, get some different ideas in there. Dave Freiberg, too, was in Quicksilver. But you
right.
have some real solid hits coming from Sly Stone, and that established the Bay Area as the number
Yeah,
one place for R and
yeah.
B of
Well,
that type.
there were a few from Texas. You know, Sly is a local Texas boy. He and Janice, you know, both from Texas. You know,
Originally, but they were
yeah,
Vallejo, and
yeah,
then they sat in and the whole family sat there, sort
yeah.
of in a cult like way,
Right.
to say, we're not going to take any gigs for a year.
Yes,
We're going to
yes,
sit here and work on these 14 songs.
yes.
I come from a little bit of the gospel background too. I recorded for Savoy Records and played secretly
Okay.
on some black gospel groups, Helen Stevens and the Voices of Christ, 2 albums with them, the San Francisco Inspirational Choir. I toured to the Madison Square Garden Convention with James Cleveland and recorded with him. I'm
Really?
the white kid that recorded with the black groups.
Yeah.
And that is the tradition of gospel music that's so deep in Oakland since World War II and the establishment of Oakland as a place for World War II veterans.
So,
Um, so story there, right?
yes.
Um, but the real problem with the Bay Area was it never became a recording hub like LA.
Okay.
There was no standard in 1966. You had Coast, you had Golden State,
Right.
two old houses that were ancient in
Yeah.
their technology. There was no basis for studio musicians to move to San Francisco because there would not be enough work. It was a vicious circle. It never could establish itself until things like the Automat and CBS and Record Plant came along. I got involved in those studios later on down the line, but that's another story.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
Once
right.
they finally arrived, then you had Fleetwood Mac coming in the 70s, mid 70s. Finally had some hit making, and it
Yeah.
just was global then. It didn't matter where you were recording because
Right.
everything started to sound the same.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Anyone over there near on the West Coast at that time, you know, even up in Seattle, Washington, all the bands, they had to travel to LA to record, you know,
Yeah,
all of them over there. That was the place to really the only place, like you said, over there. And then on the East Coast, New York, you know.
of course. Memphis, Nashville, the
Yeah.
South,
Yes, you did it. You did have Nashville. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Chicago. Holy Christ,
oh
you're
yeah, then
talking
you got yeah, you do
all
have
about
in the
R&B.
Midwest, Chicago. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Who was Rod Albin?
Rod's Peter's brother, and he
Okay,
played with us. That was the
okay,
first Freedom Highway at the 1090 Page band,
okay,
was a pickup band of just him and Mike Lamb, who was a
okay.
friend of Phil Lesh's. Mike Lamb was a guitar player, singer for a band. I couldn't sing for shit till I was 35. Mike Lamb.
Okay.
And the album shows that. I was a 16-year-old kid. I couldn't sing
Yeah.
at all. But Mike was our guy, and that was the reason why Bill signed us, I think, plus my bottleneck slide playing. Mike was a friend of Phil Lesh's, and Phil turned us on to 1090 Page, and we moved into there playing on Wednesday nights for 50 cents at the door.
Oh wow, wow.
And
What?
Rod owned an amplifier. Whoa. You know, the thing about being in a band is there's only one thing you really need. It's a
Yeah,
guy that has equipment.
yeah, yeah.
That's what the 60s were. The
Yes,
50s
yeah.
too,
Well,
probably.
you know, there's
Rod
a
was the man. It was a
I,
Gibson Hawk. And man, that was great. I could plug into that and
yeah.
play.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Talking about inflation. There's a thing I saw on Facebook a couple of days ago. You may have seen it about how far a dollar would go in 1960. You know what all you could buy for a dollar. You know, you could.
Five
I
cents.
remember. Yeah, I remember. You could go to a diner and
Five Stadium.
two people could eat for a dollar. Yeah.
$1.25.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. And it's
mhm,
just how far it went. You know, and
sure.
bizarre, bizarre.
It's about 10 times now, maybe 12.
Right. It's just incredible how it
Everything. Guitars, 10
how
times.
Outrageous, outrageous. Well, you did play live shows with Big Brother and the Holding Company
Yeah,
and
many times.
Quicksilver.
Right.
Uh,
I slept with Janice. The thing
oh,
is,
okay.
what was the truth of the matter is that I did sleep with her. We were at 54 Martha Street, a very tiny office about the size of this. And Ann Hatch was there with these hash brownies. And the management team was there.
Yes,
Janice
yes,
was there.
yes,
I
yes,
don't know how many other musicians. I happened to be there for some
yes.
reason, San
Yeah,
Francisco, because they were our managers.
yeah,
My band, her band. I
yeah,
didn't know her that well.
yeah.
Anyway, we had a couple of those hash brownies, and we fell asleep dead on the floor. I never saw her again.
Did you?
So when
Yes.
I was doing Beatlemania, I was actually playing Lennon for this show. This was an Apple authorized product, by the way,
Yeah,
at the Vision Quest, what was it called? Vision Expo
yeah.
in Las Vegas.
I,
And they wanted to promote their Vision software
yeah.
product, which
Okay.
was Apple endorsed sunglasses for
Yeah.
people
You
who
know,
wanted to look like John Lennon. And
yeah,
they hired a band to play for that. And, that's what it is now,
yeah,
endorsement of a
yeah.
product that people want.
Right, right. That's what it's been reduced to me. Yeah. I
Yeah,
used to have those little stickers. I remember that. I don't know where they came from. I don't know if it was from cereal but I had the blue meanies. I had a couple of those little stickers,
yeah.
decals. I remember. I don't,
Fantastic.
yeah, I don't know what happened to them.
Those are great items. It was a
Yeah,
good spirit then,
yeah,
the kind of
yeah,
feeling of that was
right,
liberation. And I think the basis of San Francisco, the
yeah,
way I see things, was
yeah,
that musical talent was always there. You had Shel Silverstein writing great country
yeah.
songs,
Right,
and
right.
then sitting there on a boat in Sausalito. But you had the Kingston Trio, and you had Vince Guaraldi and Cal Jader, and terrific jazz scene. Jesus, I
Yes,
saw Cannonball Adderley on in
yeah,
North Beach playing in a club. I could hear it from
yeah,
outside because I
yeah.
wasn't eligible to
That's
get in. But
Yeah, that's
but
that's follow. You mentioned Vince
but
Guaraldi with cast your fate
but
to the wind. Cast your yeah,
but the whole rock scene would
yeah,
not have been what it became there
yeah.
without the anti-war movement,
Right,
because
right.
there was a reason for people to drop out of the system and say, wait, I'm draftable age and I don't like the war. I'm going to join this clan of people who are also against the war and go to these concerts. And there were many benefits for the Vietnam anti-war movement in the very beginning, and
Yeah,
also legalized marijuana. The Charlatans did one of those for Lemar. And that was what prompted the popularity, in my view.
yeah, yeah.
Without the anti-war movement, I don't know.
Right. I, I think that was the fire that was lit there. Yeah, and I think it just took off. You're right. You're right. You needed something like that. You know.
Yeah, once the Beatles recognized it, and they said,
Yeah.
"Oh, San Francisco is a little step ahead of us. Better up our game here. Get in with a little drug culture. Get in. I mean, we're there in it, but
Yeah.
get in with the presenting a new way of presenting it, and we are the voice of youth.
Right.
We are the voice of youth right now.
Right.
We're
Right.
going to dominate, and rock guys were dominant
Yeah.
until 1970,
Yep.
until
What do
all
you
those assassinations. Then
going back?
everything was wiped
Speak,
out.
speaking of Quicksilver, do you have any? Did you get to interact with any of the members?
Well, I used to go to John Cipollina's house all the time. We'd go over, and Nicky Hopkins was there living in the
Yeah,
top.
Nicky Hopkins. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, once that was a little later on. In the very beginning, I have to say that John Cipollina of Quicksilver paid my rent for a year
Okay. Uh,
because they worked, and we got on bills with them. And that's
yeah,
how it worked, because we were making $15 out of that salary a man
yeah,
after gigs. It didn't matter. No one asked or was so hardcore or hard ass about the money. It was
yeah.
to be this part of this exciting scene. It was to be part of it, to be there with the Dead playing somewhere. You just had to. It was
Right.
almost a patriotic thing, but the bands were getting work. we must
Yeah.
have played 250 gigs. I
Yeah.
must have made a total of $100
Yeah.
adding
Yeah.
every gig I
Yeah.
played,
Yeah.
because it
Well,
all went into our band,
yeah. Well,
and because we were tagged with Big Brother and
yeah.
Quicksilver. Where did it end? Well,
Yeah.
easy to say.
Yeah.
Monterey, and Janice was swept up in the management team that, really makes things happen in the
Yeah.
business,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
And once she left Big Brother and the holding company, our management team,
yeah.
having dawdled with Quicksilver too long to
Okay.
catch the first wave with the Jefferson Airplane,
Right.
waited and then finally released 2 years later their album.
Yeah.
Our chances of doing anything there ended by 1969 when I turned 19.
Okay. And the next year, you mentioned Nicky Hopkins playing with Quicksilver.
Yeah.
One of my favorite tracks is that instrumental Spin Drifter. You familiar with that
I
one?
don't know that. Is that on
From
the?
the from 1970. Oh,
I
it's a
remember
great.
Girl from Mill Valley, though.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
on Jeff Beck's album.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Nicky was touring around with Jeff Beck. What happened there was he was on the road with Jeff, and Jeff says, you guys get yourselves home, all right? When the tour's
Yeah.
over, I'm going back home to England.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any money or flights.
Oh,
They went to high and dry. Mickey Waller ended up living with the guy that made our Bruce Walford's the name of the engineer on that
okay.
CD in Switzerland that you should never buy.
Yeah.
And Bruce's house was where Mickey ended up, the drummer for Jeff Beck, and he was
Right.
sitting there
Right.
looking for work. That's up in Fairfax, and Nicky went over to John's house, hung out with the Airplane. I guess they did Woodstock,
Yeah.
and they were left high and dry.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess Ron made it back.
Yeah. At least he made it back. Yeah. Yeah. Nicky, just a great, great pianist, and he played for
Yeah.
so many different bands too. And
Oh,
just
earlier
added.
than I ever imagined. And I was so naive. I didn't look, and
Yeah.
we didn't have the ability to look back.
Yeah.
You get
Yeah.
an LP and you say,
Yeah.
well, I want to learn this song to cover it, which is people didn't do that many covers, but hey, I got to learn it. So you listen, you got to try to get the lyrics. You got them wrong most of the time. You can't hear the thing. It's pre
Yeah.
CD.
Right.
And,
Right.
people just didn't have a way to look up something on YouTube to see how to play this thing.
Right.
So a lot of great songs were done where the guy really didn't know how to play the thing or play it like the original,
Like the
but
original.
added his own way of playing it, and that was part of the joy of it, I think, possibly the mystery of it. Now
Yeah.
you've got kids that can play everything and you can find it on YouTube and slow it down.
Yes.
Man, you
Exactly.
can learn everything, and there's such good musicians out there. Nothing like it.
Oh.
Bay
Oh, there
Area
are.
have the worst musicians in the world. I love them. I swear, the guys that I played with at jam sessions, I'd go and
Yeah.
jam at Quicksilver. They had
Yeah.
a little house on a hill in Corte Madera that was just dedicated. There's
Yeah.
nothing around it. It was completely blank then, no other houses. So it can be as loud as you want. They had an 8-track tape recorder in there, and we would jam for hours on the same song, one
Yeah.
song, and
Yeah.
nobody had the guts to finish the thing.
Right. Right.
The
Yeah.
musicianship was a
Yeah.
section of Jerry Garcia and Jorma Kaplan.
Okay. Yes.
The guys
Yes.
that came later.
Right. Right. Well, a few years later, Greg Rowley and Early Journey, I enjoyed that before
Yeah,
Steve Perry.
Bill
I
Sean,
mean,
man, you have these guys,
I
and
mean,
now they learned.
yeah, yeah. Now, Infinity is still one of my favorite albums, but after that, when they sold out, I didn't have any use for them anymore. But I like that early stuff with Greg. Yeah. In
Yeah,
fact, I've reached out to him. I don't think he'll be up to doing one of these, but he's a big shot.
big shot.
But yeah. Well, do you have memories of the recording sessions from 68 and 69?
No, there wasn't any recording sessions. What
Okay.
happened on the CD are you referring to?
Yes, yes.
That was actually just done in the living room of a Tam Valley home that we all lived in and shared.
Okay. Okay.
So it was like the Help movie where everybody lives in the same house, that fantasy. Well, we had,
Yeah.
like most
Okay.
bands.
Yeah.
We moved out of the heliport, which was nice. for rehearsing, except that Blue Cheer was right across the hall from us.
Oh, blue. Yeah. Yeah.
And then next door, which was a joy, was the Sons of Champlin, which we could hear through the walls. The place wasn't built for soundproofing at all.
Right. Right.
Down the hall was Michael Bloomfield with Buddy Miles and the American Express. So we moved to a house in Mill Valley, and then Bruce Walford and who passed away, was a great engineer, great friend. And Paul Stubblebine, who became the mastering engineer at CBS. Was I lucky or what? They set up a couple of tape recorders and recorded it live, single tapes, put the vocals on afterwards, send it out as a demo. Bill Graham loved the demo, but we had broken up by the time he received the thing. And John Palladino from Capitol was also interested in us. But
Oh,
when
okay.
it came out, well, the band had broken up.
That was my question. Okay, there was some interest, but
No recording ever was done of the band.
okay, okay, all right, all right.
Oh, no.
Well, well, you well, you did have those, home recordings basically, and they did show up again, decades later,
Right. Because
so
somebody was just absolutely obsessed enough to want to track it down.
right, right,
The thing
yeah,
you want in the music
right,
business is for
right,
people who like you.
right,
This
right.
is the message that I would like to impart to
Yeah,
my fellow musicians who go out on stage and want to impress people with their the powerful paradiddles and incredible pentatonic scales,
yeah,
which have no effect on an audience. What
yeah,
affects them is when you reach out to them and give them something they want. You could
right,
feel it.
right. Yes, yes, yeah. But speaking of I just wanted to mention three tracks that I like off of that compilation. Uh, Give,
That's it.
great harmonies on that one.
That's Bruce Brymer. What a
Okay.
marvelous musician.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a really nice one. And then Heaven Train to me has a kind of Grateful Dead kind of feel.
Yeah. Now with a better singer,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that was my only solo on
Okay.
it. No, I sang one of the songs, but I'm a very poor singer there. I was 16, for God's sakes.
Yeah,
It's no excuse. Stevie Winwood was 16, for Christ's sake, when he had his hits.
yeah.
Is that right?
Right. He
And,
was
but
young.
I never got the lessons. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I was kind of tight in here because of emotional problems with my upbringing and no support from anybody. I felt
Yeah.
tight. This
Yeah.
is the analysis that came later
Yeah.
when I took lessons from Kathy Hudnall, whose father taught opera for years at San Francisco Opera. Wow. The Hudnalls are teachers. And Kathy taught me to cry a little bit when I finally found a voice inside of me, and I learned to be a knockout singer, which I have to say immodestly. I'm great.
Yes.
I'm 75 too.
Yeah. Well,
And I
most.
didn't blow my voice out, which is the saving grace of not being a good singer for 35 years.
Yeah. Well, most good singers don't develop that early, like Stevie. It takes a few more years. So,
Ray Charles sounded like Charles Brown. And in his first recordings, he sounded like somebody else,
uh-huh.
It takes a while to get it.
Right. One more track I want to mention off of that compilation, "Be My Friend."
Yeah.
That's a nice rock. That's a nice rocker. And let me
That's
guess.
the essence of Scott Inglis's. And
That's
that's when
okay.
Scott plays on it. And
Now,
that's the essence of what I wanted to do with this
okay.
band.
Okay.
That
Now
was the best.
I imagine that song went down well in concert.
Boy, that was a good one because Bruce would play the double kick
Yeah.
drums,
Yeah.
and we really turned up the amps, and that was great.
I can hear that one in concert. Just the
But I can
going
say
down.
about an unknown band that nobody remembers
Yeah.
is that the people who saw us live did get a good show.
Yeah. Do you still hear from fans that were
No, no, no.
not young?
I've not got any fans, but for the
Okay.
people that were went to high school which is why my Facebook page is more or less there just to show my face earlier, how
Yeah.
I looked then, so people from back then will say, "Oh, I remember you," and then we can get a little this going, and that's the entire reason to be on Facebook.
Yeah.
Really, it's a fine place. I've always supported it.
Right.
Love it.
Right. Well, that's my first point of contact for all of you guys is Facebook, unless you have your own website, you know.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do that when I pull out all the stops, and
Yeah.
actually release the music. I have not done
Okay.
an actual release of any of my music. There was
Right.
a compilation that I did with a few friends, and we formed a corporation. And I did have a bunch of people I liked to put on that record. Tommy Two Tone,
All right.
he
Did
was not
did you
a
know
hit maker.
this may
He
have
had not
happened
had it.
this may have happened in different cities too, but I was in high school when that came out, eight six
Yeah,
seven five three zero nine, and
yeah.
there was a local number here. So this girl, it was a girl, she kept get calls all the time,
Where was that, Texas?
yeah, here in Texas, in Plano,
Yeah,
and that's where it was, and it actually a real phone number. She just kept getting calls off. The phone was off the off the
I bet.
wall.
Well, me and
Yeah,
Tommy used to hang out together and
yeah,
play at him and his brother's place right near where Janice lived up on the hill in Larkspur.
yeah,
And we'd get together and just play whatever popular song, 6, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9
yeah. and
would be
and cheap
one.
and cheap date. I like that one too.
Yeah, and then Alex wrote the song, but this is before Tommy was a hit man.
Yeah,
We got together and he put out a song called Gas Party, and I put it on a compilation.
yeah,
Me and Tommy were friends, and then his older brother was a really good guitar player, Andy Heath.
right, right.
Anyway, who else was on that album? Mark Adler was in a group, and he became a very prominent film score. He
Oh,
lives in LA. He's
okay.
written some wonderful soundtracks. He's up for something this
And
this
then we talked a little after we were off the other day about Greg Kinn as well. Yeah, and he
Greg.
was
Yeah, well, that was where Gary went to Oakland and Berkeley's Berkeley Records,
Berserkly Records. Yeah, yeah,
and a whole cadre of sort of punk power pop
yeah,
guys who really were the kind of things that I liked
yeah.
started up over there, but I had lost interest in the music scene
Uh,
completely by
I bet.
then.
Yeah.
But that's where Gary found his niche, and he produced Ruben Ooze. He was in the studio
Oh,
doing
Rivenews.
do
Yeah,
the musical stuff there, and even play on some
yeah.
of that. Jonathan Richmond was in that
Yes. Yeah.
one
Oh, yeah.
and out of there, and Greg Kinn was
Yeah.
eventually where, but he was in Earthquake, anotay band out of Oakland, with Robbie Dunbar and a few other fellows. That's
Yes.
what happened to Gary
Yes.
Phillipet, and he became Phillips for
Philip.
that.
Okay.
Philip Phillipet.
Yeah. Well, did you want to talk some about the political experience you had? Jerry Brown and then Howard Dean?
Yeah, we'll take hours, but I have all the original. I have actually saved a lot of the things of our history in
Yeah.
terms of newspapers. For example, I have the assassination of Kennedy.
Yeah.
Before that, I saved things as well. But from that point on, it became a habit of mine to save periodicals and things that, so I have a large library of things. But I saved all of Jerry Brown's campaign material from 92 when I was in the office with him. I was fielding calls back then because they felt for some mistaken reason that I had some ability to talk to people on the phone. Probably because no one else in that place cared much about real politics. When we got to meetings, and there were 7 or 8 of us in meetings, the campaign director, the one person in charge of his campaign, spent 45 minutes talking about couscous and what kind of food that we're going to serve the
Yeah.
media when they come from New York. We have to get this to be a holistic kind of
Okay.
more of a you know, and I just walk out and say, I have to answer some phones. Do you mind if I do some business here?
Yeah.
That's the kind of place. And then you had the position papers back in then. So I have some position papers.
Yeah.
They sat in stacks against the wall, never delivered to anyone.
Really.
It was not a position paper era anymore, you know, the 90s. It
Okay.
was a Newt Gingrich era where a guy would say, well, those people are a food stamp nation. And that was the impact on the country.
Uh,
Those kinds of things
got you. Got you. Yeah.
had the impact, not position papers. Look
Yeah.
at this. We're going to do this and this and this and this and this for you. Well, when?
Mm,
But
yeah.
I stuck it through, and I wanted Jerry to beat Bill Clinton out of it. And what happened? It's
Yeah.
very simple. In a debate, Jerry gets serious. He talks about climate change, the things that are coming, the policies that we're going to, and this is wrong, this is that. And then Bill Clinton turns to him and says, lighten up,
Yeah. Yeah.
lighten up. And
Uh,
he won it.
in
What
that
happened
Jerry.
then?
Yeah.
The Democratic Party
Yeah.
decided that Bill's probably our better bet. He's from the South. And so, you know, we had a guy like Bernard Shaw calling the office saying, you know, you're not going to be able to do what you did in Connecticut because we won Connecticut. You're not going to be able to do in Connecticut, in New York, what you did in Connecticut. Jerry goes to New York, and they sent guys that were dressed as rabbis, supposed to be rabbis, and they heckled him. He's an
Oh,
anti-Jew. He's an anti-Semite. He lost
right.
New York, and Bill Clinton won.
And
That's how
lost.
politics works.
Yes. Yes. And
In
it's
a moment,
yeah.
the dean screamed. In a moment, the sound man, not being a professional,
Hmm.
doesn't send a feed to the networks. He lets them take the feed off the board without any crowd noise. Well, you always put crowd noise in there in the mix if you're sending a feed to the network so that you can hear the shouting and the yelling and the crowd around him. We sent him an ISO mix of Howard Dean by himself screaming. And
Fun.
that's what the networks used to take him down. It's just an
Oh,
excuse.
yeah. Yeah. You got to have all your ducks in a row. Yeah. When you
Have
do.
to have a professional
Yeah.
and you have to be up to date.
On top of things. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Gotta be ahead, 10 steps ahead of them. They're using
Right.
AI.
Right. 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 Oh yeah, I believe it. Yeah. Exactly.
Predictive behavior analysis.
Yeah. I totally believe that. Yeah. How about Bush Family Fortunes? You
That was
contributed some
Great
music.
Palace.
Yeah.
Yes, Great Palace was a very good hit the road. I'm gonna go ask for files personally
Yeah.
guy.
Okay.
Whereas many of the reporters today Google it
Yeah. Right.
to
Right.
find the truth.
Right.
This guy
Right.
hit the road and he went out there and he interviewed people maybe that didn't welcome his questions so much and kicked him out of the office. Well, that was a movie that was made and it was released on the BBC because nobody here would release it, called Bush Family Fortunes, which he
Yeah.
traces the oil relationships between the Bush family and the oil uh, interests.
Right.
So what happens there is he traces down that there's problems with Catherine Harris and the files in Florida from
Yeah.
the 2000 election, and he
Yeah.
feels that there's been some tinkering there.
Yes.
So he
Yes.
traces these things down, makes a movie, releases on the BBC, and then it gets re-released. So the fellow that did the most of the music and the blaringly loud pop music track by Moby, which was should have been mixed lower, um, had some gaps, and they needed music, so I put in some extra cues, as it's called, which is not a song really. It's just traveling music, environmental music behind the scene.
Yeah.
Maybe it's low level or maybe a little suggestive of Texas when you have a little twangy guitar going. Well, that was
Yeah.
released in the second version of the movie Bush Family Fortunes, and then the third movie came out, and I have no idea. I may have been erased out of it. because he decides to re-release the movie several times in CD form and try to resell it, I presume to make money, which
Yeah.
is what it's all about.
Yeah, it's what it's all. It's bottom line there. Yeah.
Yeah, good
Wow.
for him. He's a little bit interested in the tinkering and the machines, and I'm not sure I go down that alley.
Well, well, what is the country ensemble that you're playing with?
Well, this is a an idea that came up when I started to do Hank Williams as
Uh,
a tribute to Hank.
yeah.
I was on the East Coast as a musical director for a show at the Tropicana in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and I would bring in different acts, some of them very good. I worked with Susie Griffiths, who was in the Pulp Fiction movie, and you saw her in the dance sequence as Marilyn.
All right. Right. Yes. 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 Yes.
Also in that sequence was a Ed Sullivan character
Uh
on the dance floor, and he's made up rather grotesquely because they wanted to
huh.
exaggerate the
Uh-huh.
grotesqueness of it. But that fellow was one of the funniest classic Catskill Mountain type, only in my age, more younger um, comedian, and he did his Ed Sullivan act, and that was the MC of the show. It was a tribute, really, to the Ed Sullivan show as a format, and we played for a year in Atlantic City up the Tropicana to sell out crowds on a Tuesday afternoon with 2,200 seats. Sell out,
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
and it was a terrific show where Jerry would be there. We'd have two dummy CBS cameras. It looked like a television stage. It was the deepest stage in Atlantic City and one of the bigger stages on the East Coast for that type of show. So we had the ability to create all kinds of sets for the various acts that would come on the stage. We even had jugglers, we had puppeteers, opera singers,
Oh, okay.
a variety show, just as if
Right.
it were the Ed Sullivan Show.
Right.
So, because we brought in new acts all the time to entice the crowds, we would get in a Streisand, she'd leave, and we had a gap. I put on a Stetson
Yeah.
and got the boys to learn how to play a little country behind me. They were in silhouettes. We had
Oh,
really good light company, and I
okay.
would come out as Hank Williams. But that was something that I wasn't born with. I learned country music along the way in the 70s when Dolly and Porter were on television. That's when we started that.
Oh, okay. Right. Right.
That was
Right.
the inspiration. That was so good because those were live guys on that stage. And the Porter Wagner show and then the Wilburn brothers would come on every Saturday afternoon. And
Uh-huh.
I'll tell you something, that pedal steel player and those guys were jazz musicians. They could play anything, but they
Right. Yeah.
played in country. And
Yes.
that made it exciting because they were not faking it.
Yes. Well, how far is Bakersfield from San Francisco?
Oh, just about 8 hours, I guess, here. No,
Oh,
maybe. Oh, Bakersfield from San Francisco.
yeah.
I'm in
Yeah.
LA, so I think in terms of LA.
Oh,
San
San
Francisco
Francisco.
to Bakersfield would be about 4 hours, I
Okay.
think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like I like a lot of that sound, the Buck Owens and Merle
Yeah.
Haggard and yeah, liked a lot of
Yeah.
that.
I
Yeah.
know the revenue. Now, what happened for me was I left show business.
Yeah.
I was disgusted with the marijuana everyday search for and quit smoking in 1970. Decided that as soon as I turned 21, I was going to hit my Studebaker on that pavement. I was going to hit it and head north and move to Eureka, California, wherein I played in a country western band. I played a pedal steel guitar, and I played with a band that had been Dave Frizzell's band. Dave
Oh,
Frizzell, the brother
oh,
of Lefty Frizzell.
Lefty. Right. Right.
Right. Dave Frizzell's still around and plays, I think. I don't know if he's, knock knock. But they were some older guys. They were 40. Wow.
They were
I
ancient.
wanted to learn how to
Yeah.
play. And I think that was miffed by the fact that everybody in the Bay Area seemed to be obsessed with just scoring. I mean, we're going nowhere professionally.
Yes.
So I wanted to be like the session guys in LA, know how to really play and go record in the studio. So that was my training to get out in the real world to learn how to play in a bar band. Because
Okay.
all that time before I had been playing Fillmore type big gigs. Big
Yeah.
gig.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wanted to play small gigs.
Small. You want to go from big to small.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
learn what it's really like.
Yeah. Well, it's more intimate like that. I think the smaller gatherings are, you can even, talk to the audience, take questions afterwards,
Mhm.
like that. You can't do that at big arenas, big,
The
you know.
model that's now current for clubs, unfortunately, is that you play one night and go out because we have different crowds coming in, different, way to pay for play and whatever. But the thing is, they can't survive with. They say they
Yeah.
can't survive with this same band playing unless you get out in the boonies. Same band playing every night. No, but
Yeah.
that's how you learn. And
Yeah.
that's why I moved to a place where you could play 5 nights a week, 6 nights a week. I ended
Yeah.
up playing in the strip bar for a year up there,
Yeah.
which was a house of prostitution upstairs.
Okay.
Not a strip bar downstairs. No, it was just go-go dancers in cages.
Yeah. Oh, the Go-Go Girls. Yes. 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 Yes.
Yeah, one
Yeah.
of them was the wife of the bass player.
Was he?
But
Was
anyway,
she?
the thing was, you get to be good when you're like the Beatles at Reeperbahn or wherever
Yeah.
it is, Stones,
Yeah.
whenever they played. I don't know if the Stones really did that much hard work, but the
Right.
Beatles did,
Yeah.
and the band did with Levin
Yeah.
Helm and the Hawks.
Oh, right.
You learn how to play.
Right.
You
Yeah.
don't learn how to play with rock stars who
Yeah.
just shoot up there like quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. That doesn't, yeah, you got to hone your craft. You got to be, like you said, work at it.
And there
Uh,
were guys around that tore my ass off, man. They were just like I couldn't stand to be with them
yeah.
because I idolized them. Terry Haggard. Oh, what a player! And this guy his father had been a jazz guitar player, played with Ernie Hector's office orchestra at the Fairmont, played
Yeah.
all the jazz gigs in town for anybody who came to town, Sarah Vaughan, Ella, whoever. I'm sure that Terry's father was there. And there he was, Terry Haggerty, the son of playing
Yeah.
traditionally great jazz in a rock band, kind of beating out Blood, Sweat, and Tears, I think, by a few months, maybe, as a
Oh,
horn band that could kick ass.
yeah.
But I said to myself, how am I ever going to be able to play like Terry? That was the guy.
Okay.
Not John Cipollino, God love him, or the rest of the airplane people or anybody around. Nobody could touch him.
Yeah.
And the Grateful Dead were afraid of um, playing after those guys.
Right. Right.
So they had him close on one day.
Did they?
Yep.
Uh,
I don't know the reason totally, but I'm just
yeah. You could
surmising because that's
speculate.
what Jerry says. Oh, we don't want to follow those guys. They're too fucking hot. And there was a couple of
Mhm.
weeks period where they were the
Yeah.
best band in the Bay Area, I think.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of, I talked to a guy recently, a UK musician. They were on tour in Germany with the Who, you know, and how huge the Who were. And they basically they didn't hijack this other guy's band, but they didn't like him opening for them, and they Keith Moon just went over to the other guy's drum set and pushed him, knocked him down, just pushed him. Yeah, I mean, he was drinking at the time, which I think he always had a drink. Yeah, and just flat out. He thought he was going to shake his hand. He came over to him and he reached out to shake his hand, and no, he just he just pushed his drums down.
I almost love it. The
Yeah,
English have a great,
yeah,
they have a good spirit. When you see it in Americans, it just
yeah.
isn't as gracious somehow when a guy like what's the name of the guitar gonna rock this town, Stray Cats?
Oh yeah, yeah. I can't
Yeah,
think of his name, but yeah,
Brian Brian Setzer. Now
Brian
he's a
Setzer.
nice guy, and I understand he's having some problems with his hand. I hope he gets well with that. But
Yeah,
anyway, on his punkier day when he was a little,
yeah,
he had some vinegar and piss in him. And
Yeah.
I'm at a jam session. This is at Radio Recordings, a
Yeah.
studio in LA, Radio Records, which was owned by a guy named Frenchie for a while. It was where Bing Crosby first broadcast live in the
Yes.
20s, the 30s, Radio Records in Hollywood. So there's a big party there. It's VIP people there, and my friends are on stage with a band to play at this little VIP party.
Yeah.
And Brian comes in, and so the guys around are standing on a break, and they're around me, and they say, "Richie, you want to play?" And I said, "Sure." Got what everybody knows. Let's launch into Route 66. Why not?
Yeah.
Brian stands there, and they say, "Hey, it's Brian. Oh, Brian's here, man. Do you want to get up too and jam?"
Yeah.
And Brian says, yeah, yeah, okay, let's do Route 66 when I get up there."
Yeah. When
That
he
person,
said
I
the
say, forget
same
about
thing.
it.
Same thing.
You got it, man. You know,
Yeah.
go ahead. No, no, anybody who makes it in the business has my respect.
Yeah.
And I mean that from the crappiest musician on.
Right.
It takes a lot. And it takes your dedication
Yeah.
and also discipline. Because
Discipline.
these days, if you're
Discipline.
Slash,
Yeah.
can you show up
Yeah.
without that fucking hat,
Right.
without those curls?
Yeah.
Can you show up clean shaven
Yeah.
without the hat?
Uh,
I'm not so sure. I
yeah.
think your fans are going to be a little bit disappointed.
Yeah.
You're stuck, man.
Yeah.
Whatever you did that was popular, that's where
Yeah.
you're going to be.
Yeah. That's
It's
right.
that tight. There's too much competition.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It is too much competition. Yeah. It's
Glad
like,
it worked out. I was really
yeah.
worried that it wouldn't on the technology end
Yeah. Yeah.
because this is a
Yeah.
computer over here that's you can't see that is dedicated to
Yeah.
recording only. I have a
Yeah.
recording studio here which you cannot see,
Yeah.
but it is old school and I will not update it because it working perfectly before I decided to join Zoom.
Yeah.
And Zoom won't go on that computer.
Right. Right. Yeah. It doesn't like, yeah, certain things.
Has
And
to be 10.14 or 10.2. Has to be
right.
silicon.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much. You're very
Well,
interesting. I wish I could
well,
talk to you more just to hear
well,
about your life. There's no sugarcoating it, and the
yeah.
thing about life is that really you have to make peace with all those
Yeah.
things and embarrassments and things you did wrong. And there are many in my life,
Yeah.
but I tell you what, I recommend that nobody um, try to go back to the 60s and emulate it. And it's awfully um, problematic that I see people really trying to relic their guitars
Oh,
and vintage out their look and try to get some sort of a mystical thing that they didn't live through
yes.
because they think that the
Yeah.
60s was a real joyride.
Right. Yeah.
We are fighting 100 times worse than the 9/11 attack right
Yeah.
now, and think that we better stay in the present,
Yeah. Yeah. We have
right?
to. Okay.
And I've
Yeah.
noticed that PBS lately, so I'll end on this.
Okay.
PBS lately, whenever terrible things happen in our country, I mean, really, really bad things, somehow networks feel and our communication and our media somehow feels, gosh, people are really shocked right now. Let's give them something. The Beatles.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just lost your president.
Yeah.
Let's put these guys out there and make sure that people at least can settle on something they can hold on to that gives them a little bit of hope. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Right.
Well, what happened now after this last couple of months that Trump is back in office? The stock market went like
Yes.
that
Right.
and is now shaky.
Right.
We're getting Fleetwood Mac on PBS.
Yeah.
3 shows at once of rock concerts, of goodies, the
Yeah.
stuff we love. All right, man, we're
Yeah.
getting all the goodies and the dope religion, sex, and TV, like John Lennon says,
Right. Yes.
right? Give them
Yes.
all the dope religion, sex on TV right now because it's too brutal out there. We killed
Yeah.
400 people yesterday.
Yes.
We killed 400 people yesterday
Yes.
in Palestine,
Right. Yes.
Gaza.
Yeah. Yeah. We, we need people need an escape, or they think we all need an escape,
We
from
shall not escape.
yeah.
This is your life, because my life is not over by any means. I have another 15, 20 years of doing this.
Hey, there you go.
I played
There-
5 gigs in the last 6 days.
Oh, okay. So you are
I'm
keeping
playing
very.
tomorrow, Thursday night, and Sunday night this week.
Whoa, okay. Well, good for you. Good for you, Richard. It keeps you young too, doesn't it? It
I'm
does.
going to look you up and see more about you on
Okay.
how do I find your interviews?
Yeah, I'll send you a link to that after
Okay.
this. And
I
then
didn't snoop.
I'll
I
also
didn't look
send
you
you.
up at all or snooper. I just went on trust and faith. I
Hey, there
didn't
you go.
look to see if I could figure you out
Do
or
it.
anything,
See,
man.
you know what I tell people? I say, thank you for taking that leap of faith. That's what I say.
Anybody who is foolish enough to track me down.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Then it's worthwhile. It's definitely worthwhile. All right. Yeah, I'll send you that too. But in about a week, I'll send you the edited copy, and you can post it on your Facebook or anywhere you'd like to. And then
I'll
it'll
probably
also be
never look at it.
well.
That's
When I
the way
first.
I am. I don't listen to things that I'm in, honestly.
Okay.
But I will check out your
Okay.
site to see
Well,
everything.
yeah, and yeah, send it to friends and things like that if you want to.
Okay.
But
Thank
but
you very
I'll.
much.
You're very welcome. And
No, really, I'm honored. I'm honored.
okay, well,
Thank you.
it's well worthwhile, and I enjoy doing these. So I get a lot out of them too. So I wouldn't do it if I didn't. So all right, Richard. Well, we'll be talking to you, and you have a good rest of the week. Okay.
Keep
And
me up to date.
you. All right, we'll do.
Bye.